Hey everybody, it's Emily, and we're live for the Arrrgh Book Club discussion of The Light of Days by Judy Battalion. I'll tell you right now, I'm a whole mess. I totally spaced and forgot what day it was, and I thought this was tomorrow, so I'm doing my best here. Well, I have some tea that is too hot. It's fine. I have my book. I have some discussion questions. So I'll wait a few minutes and see if anyone else shows up. I hope so, because we can't all have forgotten what day it was. I just thought it was Friday all day today. And wasn't until about an hour ago that I went, hey, it's Saturday. There's book club tonight. So I will say that I loved this, but I wish I'd read it in a different month. This was just a really weird month for me. I don't know. I'm all over the place. And so I was like in a reading slump all month, and I just could not read with my eyeballs. I was struggling so hard with that. So I listened to the audiobook for this, and I did listen and read at the same time, because especially for a book like this, I find that really helpful, because man, was there a lot of hard to pronounce names and places in this book. Polish is a challenging language to pronounce. So I'm really glad I listened so that I could figure out how to pronounce all the things. And I still can't, so don't expect me to pronounce anything correctly. But I liked the audiobook quite a lot, especially for that. But I would say that this is a book that I wish I'd read at a different month when I was able to focus better, because I found it really hard to stay in the story. And I don't know if that's the writing, if that's just I was having a bad brain month. I don't know. But I loved the content of this. That's why I gave it 5 stars, because I just thought these women are amazing. I'm going to turn this lamp off behind me. I feel like it's giving me a weird halo. There we go. That's better. So I thought these women were just amazing. I'm in awe that there are people out there who are this strong and this brave. Could I do that? I don't know. I like to imagine that I could be brave like them, that Arrrgh is a person like me who is trying to just live my life and just do the things I always do, and to have to do something like this, to go from being just an ordinary person to this heroic spy, infiltrator, courier, all the things she did. I can't even imagine the amount of courage that must have taken. And I don't know. It's such a crazy story and so amazing. And I'm so mad that nobody ever told me about this stuff. I grew up learning about the Holocaust from a pretty young age. I mean, I think that's pretty typical for most Jewish people, is that we learn about it young, and it's sort of ingrained in us what happened, and that we want to prevent it from happening again. But most of the stuff we were taught is about how many people died and how, we were marched to our deaths and that sort of thing. And we just don't hear enough about the people who fought back. And I am craving those stories now. So I'm very glad I made us read this. I'm glad I forced myself to finally pick it up. I've had it on my shelf for a while, and I've just had been putting off reading it because I knew it was going to be a hard book, and I knew I needed to be in the right headspace. But, sometimes you just got to push yourself. So I'm glad that I did. I did find some discussion question type things just to help me facilitate a discussion, because honestly, I was not prepared for that. Being that this was just a weird month for me. But one of the questions that it has at the beginning here is that Arrrgh at first seems like an unlikely resistor. Like so many Jewish women across the country, she did not think of herself as a political person. She was not part of any organization, yet here she was, risking her life in action. How does someone who is not a political person wind up risking her life over and over again? And do you think the not political people you know could transform themselves the way Renya did? I wouldn't say I'm entirely a non-political person, but I would say like I don't belong to any organizations. I don't put myself out there that way. So I could relate a lot to that. And I feel like I could wish and hope that I could be like Renya. And in a moment of like, when this happens, will I be ready? And like, could I do it? Um, I don't know. I feel like I don't know if I would be able to do it. I don't know if I could do something like that. I think I have a lot of anxiety, and I think my anxiety would end up holding me back. But I like to imagine that when the chips are down, I could be there and I could do the thing if I had to. Um, I don't know. She did so much. I don't know that I could do everything she did, but like I like to imagine that if I had to, I could pull it together. I really liked a lot of the commentary too, as far as why women were better at this than the men were. Because so often I think we're taught that men do the things and women stay behind. And I I don't know, you're fed that a lot growing up, and I know I was. And we're supposed to be, demure and unsuspecting. And I've read so many things in the last few years that contradict this idea that men are the ones that do things and women stay behind. I mean, women, I think, are tougher than men in a lot of ways. And I think we're more suited to things like this. Like, I liked the idea that like the women were unsuspecting, that the Nazis weren't really expecting women to be ready to do anything. They're just girls. What could they do? That I guess we do look small and frail sometimes, and I can see that giving us an edge there. But I think that women just have this innate ability to pull it together and work under pressure in a way that I think men just don't. And I think also, I remember I read, what is the name of that book? Now I can't think of the title. The Indifferent Stars Above, I want to say is the name of it, about the Donner Party. I read that a couple of years ago. I love that book too. Fantastic nonfiction. But one of the things it talked about was how women were better suited to survival in situations like that, because women, our bodies are just suited that way, whereas men's are not. They're leaner. I can't remember the details now as to why men's bodies weren't able to handle it, but the men turned much faster than the women and died much faster than the women as far as that stuff goes. And so I find it fascinating that we're often taught that women can't handle things like this and should just sit back and let the men handle it. But the men can't handle it, and they need us to handle it. Honestly, like, I was just watching The Marvelous Miss Maisel last night, and that was a thing she talked about as well. Like, the men need us, and if we were to just stop, the world would stop. And so, I don't know. I found the whole idea that they needed the women for the resistance more so than the men, and that the women were better at doing the things that were necessary. I just thought that was amazing. And why are we not taught this stuff? I don't know. I wish we were. I am in awe too of Judy Battalion and the amount of research she must have done just to pull this together is just mind-boggling. I think it must have been such a huge undertaking for her. I'm sorry, my throat is dry and my tea is too hot. I'm trying to sip, but it's burning me. Okay. Let's see. What other questions did this have? A frequent refrain in the book is fight or flight. If, like some of the youth group leaders, you'd have the opportunity to leave Poland safely, would you have gone, and why do you think they stayed? This is something else I think about a lot, because when I don't know, growing up reading about the Holocaust, I was always like, well, why did they just come to America? Doesn't that seem logical? Like, why didn't they just leave? Why can't you just go somewhere safe? But now as an adult, I can understand, like, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't leave. You can't get out. And especially at that time, it was almost impossible for Jews to be able to leave and get out and go anywhere. Like, there was so many barriers to leaving, and so it wasn't even possible for most people to be able to leave the country. And then if you could, where would you go? Because even the places that were deemed safe one year were unsafe months later. Like, there was no safe place in Europe to go. Even France, which you would think is a safe place for people to go, was not a safe place to go. Like, your best bet was England or America, and neither of those places were letting all the Jews in. So I can understand now, like, why it was so challenging. But if I could leave, would I have left? I would have wanted to. I mean, and I'm envisioning myself in this situation that I'm in now there. Like, as a mother, I would want to get my kids out and, like, not risk their lives. As a single woman, I don't know. I think it would be less of a, like, wanting to rescue my family if it was just me. I don't know. I'm not sure. Hi, Jen. Jen says, that's a question I thought about a lot when reading too. I'd love to believe that I would choose to stay and fight. It's so heroic, but I think I would have left if possible, maybe to Palestine. Yeah, I don't know. I think given the options, if I were a single woman living in that time, I think my best option would either be to stay and fight and do what I can to help the resistance, or to go to Palestine, because I think those were, like, the two best choices anyone had. And not that, like, staying and fighting is necessarily a best choice, because it's the most dangerous choice. But yeah, I don't know. Such a hard thing to decide. Like, as I'm sitting comfortably in my home, sipping tea, talking about a book, like, it's hard to know what I would actually do. As a kid, I thought about this incessantly. I thought a lot about, like, what would happen to me if I lived during this time, because, that's how my brain works. I put myself in the place of all the characters I read about. And so I worried a lot about that. Like, if I lived then, what would happen to me? What would I have done? What would I try to do? I used to fantasize a lot about, like, how I would escape places. Like, I would be able to escape and find safety somehow. Reading about, like, people living in the woods is amazing. Like, I couldn't do that. Like, I don't know. I'm not built for that at this point in my life. I think were I to be caught, I'd be killed instantly, honestly. So I don't know what would have happened to me. But I'm endlessly fascinated by reading about these women and their ability to do the things that they did. Yeah, Jen, I agree. Like, being a mother makes things a whole lot different. Like, as a single woman, I'm more willing to put my life align, I think. But as a mother, no, I have to get my kids to safety. I have to do whatever I can to save them. So yeah, it's a hard decision to think about, like, what do you do? Let's see. I'm looking up questions here so we could have things to talk about. Okay, this isn't a good one. Okay. There are many stories in the light of days about how Jewish women in the resistance disguise themselves as Catholic Poles, either by physical means like bleaching their hair or by assuming more stereotypical Polish behavior. What does their success say about the idea of people looking Jewish? And how do you contrast that with the author's story of being told her whole life that her looks were traditionally Jewish, but feeling that she fit right in on the streets of present-day Warsaw? This is another thing I thought about a lot as a kid, because I look traditionally Jewish. Like I wouldn't be able to hide that. And I don't know, even bleaching my hair, I'm not sure. Like I feel like my facial features are very Jewish, and my mannerisms. I talk with my hands a lot. And like I don't know if I could hide that as well as they did. But I used to think about it a lot as a kid. Like, could I pretend to be one of the other people? And like, could I blend in? Could I hide what I am? Could I disguise myself? And why didn't more people do that? Like, I knew people growing up. I had friends growing up who were Jewish, but they didn't look Jewish to me. So I'm like, oh, well, they would have been safe because they could just like blend in and no one would know. But like, I was always convinced that I couldn't do that. But reading about these people, like, pretending to not be Jewish, and like the way they were able to just stay in the crowd and mimic what other people were doing, like going to church and doing the sign of the cross and that kind of stuff, like being able to hide in plain sight. I was just amazed that they were able to do that. They were able to stay calm. I don't know that I could have stayed calm, especially when I was standing around people like talking about murdering Jews right next to you on the train. Like, I don't know that I could have stayed like in character. I think I probably would have, especially being one of them, and like my family's all dead and I'm here alone and doing my best to stay alive. And these people next to me on the train are jokingly talking about murdering Jews. And I have to pretend that doesn't bother me. I don't know that I could do it. I am one of those people too who like my feelings show on my face and I don't know how to hide it. Like I always joke that I can't talk to my mom on like FaceTime or anything because then she'll see my facial features and she'll know what how I'm reacting to things she's saying. But I don't know how that would work for me. Like I know how to do it. Like I can pretend, I can act like I'm a Catholic, and I can act very well like I'm not Jewish, but I don't know that I could do it under pressure, which I just found absolutely amazing. Like these women, the strength that they had to be able to do that is amazing to me. Like these women are my absolute heroes. They're just like queens, and I wish I could be like them and have that kind of strength, because I'm not sure I could. Like I'm emotional right now just thinking about it. Like I don't know if I could have done what they did and live with it. Like be able to like carry on with my life afterwards. That's the thing that I find the most fascinating, is like what happens to people after, because I've read a lot of things about the Holocaust. It's been my pet project my entire life. Like since I was 12, I've been reading books about this subject. And I've spent a lot of time like thinking about what I would do in a situation like this. And I honestly don't know that I could survive it. Like I don't think I could. But also I've always been fascinated with what happens after. Because so many times when you read a book about something like this, the story ends and you're just left with, well, they lived happily ever after. She survived, so she's fine now. But they're not fine. No one's fine after this. Like it's not something that you can leave behind and then carry on. The people who survived were never themselves again. They were never okay again. Like they were able to even get married and have children and carry on. And I remember somebody saying once that their best like revenge against Hitler was having children and grandchildren and carrying on their family name and proving to the world that like we're not gone. You can't get rid of us so easily. And I loved that we got to know what happened to everybody after, because I think it's so important that we remember, like, this didn't just end for them. Like, there's a lot of trauma to deal with. And some of the people who survived didn't really survive. Like, they lived after, but they could never let it go. And I just found that very moving and touching to read like what happens to people after. Oh, Jen, you're welcome. I'm glad I made myself read this because I've had it on my shelf for a while and I knew I wanted to read it. I even have the young readers edition that I wanted to try to read this month too, but I just didn't get to it. But it's a really hard read, and I've read a lot about the Holocaust, and they're all hard reads, but this one I felt was almost like more difficult to read for some reason, and I don't know why that was for me, but there was lots of times when I just needed to set the book down and take a break because it was just a lot. And I think I've just had a really weird month. I've had a lot going on, and so it was a challenge anyway. But reading about this, all the horrible things that they went through, was just a lot to take in this month. So while I'm glad I read it, I wish it could have been in a different month because I just struggled a lot. But yeah, I'm so glad that I did read it, and I plan on reading the young readers edition with my daughter because I want her to know about these women. So I think it's important, and I think she would really enjoy is probably the wrong word. She would really like to hear about these amazing women because she's very interested in the Warsaw Uprising. We started watching. There was a TV movie. I just know Lily Sobieski's in it. But we found it on YouTube and we only watched the first half. And I keep saying we're going to go back and try to finish it, but we just haven't yet. So when I read about like the Warsaw Uprising in here, I was really excited because I was like, oh, she's going to be so psyched to know more about that. So, and to know that Rania was there. Oh my God. Just like, if I lived then, I would have wanted to be in that mix, like chucking rocks and things at the Nazis and just doing my absolute best to take them all out. I think I just found all of that stuff. I don't know, so heroic. But yeah, the other thing that I like to read about too, this talks, I'm looking at my questions. They talk about soft resistance, which is also like, I feel like more connected with the soft resistance than the like armed resistance. But I just lost my place. Where did I just see that? Oh, discuss this book's stories of soft resistance to the Nazis as well as armed resistance, women caring for orphans, creating libraries, saving important documents and cultural artifacts, even simply hugging one another in Auschwitz for comfort and warmth. How do those stories compare with the stories of women assassinating Germans and blowing up supply lines? I feel like a lot more connected with the soft resistance because that's something like I can do now. I can resist things in the world now in a way that I couldn't necessarily like arm myself and go out and shoot at people like, but like I feel like I would have been able to care for the children and rescue artifacts and books. One of my favorite books is The Librarian of Auschwitz, and Dita Kraus did that. She worked at like protecting books in Auschwitz, and I just think that is something I could connect with more readily than like picking up a gun and being able to take out Nazis. And that's the thing I could do. Like I can picture myself doing that. I think it's easier to imagine that than it is to imagine like fighting with my hands, you know? But yeah, that's another really good book. If you haven't read it, The Librarian of Auschwitz is amazing. And the way the author of that book weaves all these different stories together, and they're all real people. And Frank even makes an appearance, and I just think it's brilliant. So yeah, if you enjoyed this book, I would say pick that one up too, because it's also very good. That one's written more like fiction. Even though they're all real people, the story is told as like a historical fiction, but it's very, very good. Let's see. Let's see. I'm trying to pick another question to talk about. So, whose story in the book, where did it just go? I just saw it. Yeah, whose story did you particularly admire and who resonated with you the most and why? Honestly, Renya was the one that stuck out the most to me, and I kind of feel like her story was the main focus of the entire book, even though we did meet lots of other people. I really liked reading the chapters with Bella and Lanka. I liked their friendship a lot and felt connected to them in some way. I don't know. I looked at the pictures of everybody because I like to know what people look like. And I don't know what made me connect with Bella so much, but like I felt like I knew her somehow, which is very weird. I don't know. I'd never met anyone in her family before. I don't know her at all, but her picture, I don't know, it just like stuck with me, which is very weird. I think mostly I loved reading. I loved reading about these women and their lives and their strength. And yes, Zevia was also really fascinating. And I loved seeing their pictures. I'm so glad that the pictures were included because I'm a very visual person. I like to see things so that I can like connect in my mind. Like I have a hard time picturing people that I've never seen before. Like even if you describe them to me, I need to see it. So having their pictures in the book was great, and it helped me to connect more with them and to visualize everyone and everything that they did. Renya's motto after the war was "It happened and it passed." How did that attitude shape her new life in Israel, and what are the pros and cons of that approach? I don't know if I talked about like what happens after before already, but I think that is probably, you have to be a really strong person to think of it that way and to just like, it passed, it's over, and I'm moving on now. Like I'm in awe of people who can do that because I am the type of person that dwells. If something bad happens, to like live in that for a long time, and it takes me a really long time to move on. So for me, I think I'm not sure I could move on. So I think that's amazing, and I think that's a really strong attitude to take. And I'm in awe of that. Like I wish I could be that kind of person who can like get through something horrible like that and then just be like, it passed. And now I'm moving on. Like I think it's a hard way to live. I don't know. I hope for her that like she's really was able to just let it go like that and just be able to accept that it happened and that it's over. But I don't think I could. I think I would fall into the category of some people didn't really survive. Like, what was the quote? I think it was right here. Yeah, not everyone survives surviving. I don't know that I could survive surviving. I don't know if I could move on as easily and carry on with my life. Like, I want to believe that I could, but I know myself really well, and I think I'm not the kind of person that could survive that. And then the last question here is, prior to reading the book, had you heard of organized Jewish resistance to the Nazis, and has what you've read changed your understanding of World War II or the Holocaust? I've heard of some, but not to this extent. Like I knew there was a resistance, and I've read other books that talked about a resistance, but most of those involved like outside groups of people working with the Jews. And like the resistance that I'd heard about, I knew about the Warsaw Uprising, and I knew about the one in Sobibor, and I also knew about the men who, I think they destroyed the crematories in Auschwitz. So like I knew about some of those things, like little things, but I'd never really read anything specifically about women. and how they did this. And the organized resistance was amazing. The fact that they were all able to do this and for so long, I just thought was amazing. Like, even when they were in prison, they were able to like hide their identities. Like, I don't know. I thought these women were all just so fierce and amazing and strong. And I could only hope to be even a tiny bit like that in my own life. Oh, Jen, well, I'm glad that I picked this book then and that you read it. Because, yeah, there was a lot of resistance during the war. And I think it's easy to imagine, and especially the narrative that we're taught a lot of the time about the Holocaust and the war, is that the Jews were just sent like sheep to the slaughter. And well, that might have been the case for a very few people. The majority of Jews were not so stupid or so sheepish. They knew what was happening. A lot of Jews tried to get out. A lot of Jews did what they could to protect themselves. But yeah, there was a lot of resistance in a lot of Europe, and a lot of it goes untold. And I don't know why that is, but I wish more stories would come out about it. I've always wanted to write a book about Jewish resistance and like a story about Jews fighting back, because I feel like there's not enough of that. The world needs more of those stories. If I ever get myself in a position where I can sit and write, that's going to happen. I'm going to write a story about Jews fighting back. And I don't know. I don't know what that'll look like or when that'll happen, but it's a thing I want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. The April book is A Lat's Away by Darcy Little Badger. I'm going to start reading this really soon, I think, because it's a little bit chunky. And after the last month, I don't want to put this off too long. So I want to make sure I can get to it. So this is the book for April. I have the Discord set up. If you're interested in joining the Discord, but you haven't yet, let me know. Send me a message on Instagram or email me, and I will give you a link so you can join the Discord group. I'm going to set up the discussion channels for A Lat's Away probably right now after this video, so that we can get started talking when people start reading. I'm excited to read that. I know Sarah, my daughter Sarah, read it last year for the Sybil's Awards, and she loved it and has been trying to get me to pick it up ever since. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to make it a book club pick, because that is the only way I'm going to manage to pick this up. So I'm going to start reading that soon, and I can't wait to talk to you guys about it and share our thoughts about A Lat's Away. And all I know going into this is that this is a world in which all the mythologies that people believe, like indigenous tribes and things like that, all of those mythologies are real, and those beings exist in this world. And that's all I really know. And I'm just really interested in picking it up because I've heard nothing but great things about it. So excited to read that with all of you. And so I'll see you guys next time to talk about A Lat's Away, probably at the very beginning of May. So thanks so much for coming and hanging out and talking about The Light of Days with me. I'm so glad we read it together. And I will see you guys next time. Happy reading. Bye.